Ancient town hidden underground. Archaeologists unearthed major 13th century secrets beneath former bowling alley in Weymouth. A routine redevelopment project in the seaside town of Weymouth has turned into an extraordinary archaeological discovery after experts uncovered remarkable medieval remains buried beneath a former bowling alley site. Now it's time to go in detail and uncover the full story in today's AI
I
podcast.
want you to imagine, just for a second, um, that you are standing inside an old bowling alley.
Okay, I can picture that.
You know the exact vibe, right? The heavily polished wooden lanes stretching out in front of you, the neon signs flickering in the background,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
and that faint, very specific smell of floor wax mixed with, like, stale popcorn.
It's a very distinct smell.
It really is.
Yeah.
And you hear the heavy, rhythmic thud of the ball, the mechanical sweeping of the pins crashing.
Right.
You're standing there waiting for your turn to bowl, completely unaware that straight down, resting silently beneath the soles of your rented bowling shoes, is a 700-year-old medieval coastal settlement.
Just waiting in the dark.
Just waiting.
It is a striking visual, honestly, because, we walk around every day existing entirely in our own sliver of time.
Yeah, totally oblivious.
Exactly. We're usually completely oblivious to the physical layers of human existence stacked directly beneath our feet. I mean, modern routines playing out on the exact same geographic coordinates where people centuries ago were fighting for survival, raising families, building communities.
And we actually have the literal proof of this today.
We do.
We are diving into the recent Weymouth archaeological discovery reports. And it's wild because a totally mundane plan to bulldoze a modern entertainment space accidentally cracked open a 13th century time capsule.
It's incredible.
Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a routine redevelopment project unlocked the everyday realities of medieval life and eventually the microscopic evidence of a devastating plague.
Which is just a massive leap.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this because the origin of this whole dig is so wonderfully unremarkable.
It really is like the ultimate accidental discovery. So the site we are looking at is the former MFA bowl location in Melcombe, Regis.
Which is in the coastal town of Weymouth, right?
Right, exactly. And the town planners had an incredibly standard, almost boring vision for this plot of land.
As they usually do.
Yeah. The bowling alley was slated to be flattened, paved over, and turned into a temporary car park.
Just the car park.
Just a transient space to leave your vehicle, while they figured out a more permanent commercial redevelopment plan for the future.
You literally cannot get more mundane than a temporary car park.
No, you can't.
But there is a catch with building anything in an area with a deep historical record, right? Like you cannot just bring in the bulldozers and start pouring tarmac.
Precisely. Standard procedure dictates that before you pour concrete over a site with known historical proximity, archaeologists must conduct an assessment survey.
They have to make sure it's clear.
Yeah, they dig test trenches to ensure nothing of major historical value is resting just below the surface.
And usually they just find trash, right?
Pretty much. Usually these surveys turn up some discarded Victorian glass or maybe fragments of 19th century brick. But in this case, beneath the concrete footprint of the MFA bowl, the team struck historical gold.
And they did not just find a stray arrowhead or like a couple of shattered pots.
Not at all.
They found the literal foundations of a community.
Yeah.
We are talking about the physical footprint of 3 distinct medieval houses, along with their associated land plots.
All dating back to the 1200s.
Which is crazy.
It is incredibly rare for a routine pre-construction assessment. I mean, finding a single wall is a very good day for an archaeologist.
Let alone 3 houses.
Right. Finding 3 structured domestic properties, complete with property boundaries, it gives you a cohesive map of how a neighborhood actually functioned.
I am stuck on the contrast here.
How you mean?
Well, you have this commercial neon-lit bowling alley space, and directly below it is the gritty domestic reality of the 1200s. The site crews are currently pulling up ancient stone walls that divided up medieval living spaces.
It's like 2 different worlds occupying the same space.
Exactly. They are finding the actual medieval floor tiles that these people walked on every morning, pottery fragments from the bowls they eat their dinner out of, personal belongings, and coins.
The personal items really ground it.
They do.
Oh.
But the detail from the source material that really stopped me in my tracks was the discovery of early cold storage structures.
Ah, yes. The medieval infrastructure found at this site is highly revealing about their daily lives.
It is like a medieval root cellar.
Pretty much.
When I read cold storage, I realize We are talking about people who obviously did not have electricity, but they understood their environment well enough to dig down into the earth, maybe 3 or 4 feet, and create these insulated stone or clay-lined pits.
They were very resourceful.
Right. They were bypassing the sun's ambient heat and relying on the Earth's natural thermal mass to keep temperatures steady, which prevents their fish or dairy from spoiling.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. By digging below the superficial topsoil layer, they harness the insulating properties of the earth.
Which stays cool.
Right. It maintains a much cooler, stable temperature year-round. It shows a sophisticated understanding of food preservation. And what's fascinating here is that the presence of these specific artifacts, the cold storage pits, the structured stone walls, the coins, it points directly to a thriving, organized society.
Wait, let's look close at the coins for a second.
Sure.
If they are using standardized coinage in a coastal town in the 1200s, that means they are plugged into a broader economic network, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Like they are not just isolated fishermen trading cod for a basket of barley.
You hit the nail on the head. Finding coinage changes the entire socioeconomic profile of the settlement.
How so?
It indicates a monetized, functioning local economy that was likely participating in regional or even international coastal trade.
Wow.
Yeah, because coins require a centralized authority to mint them and a community that collectively agrees on their abstracted value. It means they were engaging in standardized commerce, taxation, and wealth accumulation.
So they were saving for the future. And I guess the cold storage proves they were managing a surplus. I mean, you don't build a permanent stone refrigerator in the ground if you are living hand-to-mouth, eating everything you catch the same day.
That makes perfect sense.
You build it because you have excess food and you need a way to protect your investments. So were they just surviving or were they thriving?
Oh, they were thriving. And that implies an extended period of stability. The medieval tiles and specialized pottery fragments further suggest a level of domestic comfort and craft specialization.
So it wasn't just bare minimum survival.
Not at all. This was a bustling, thriving coastal settlement with sophisticated daily routines long before the modern town of Weymouth was ever formally established.
The people running the dig seem genuinely taken aback by the scale of it.
They really are. Senior archaeologist Steve Wallace explicitly noted that these early stages of the project have completely exceeded their expectations.
I can imagine.
They might have suspected a few scattered remnants, but pulling up an intact 13th century neighborhood is practically unheard of for a routine survey.
Wallace's reaction underscores how pristine this site is. The layers of modern development, ironically, acted as a protective seal over the medieval foundations.
Locking them in place for centuries.
Yeah, locking them in. So we have these physical structures, the economy, the chilled fish pits. But as amazing as the stone walls and the coins are, the physical ruins are just the stage.
Right.
It is what happened to the people living on that stage that takes this deep dive to a whole different level. The macro-level artifacts tell us how they lived, but the archaeology is also going to tell us how they died.
The transition from the macro to the micro is where the true investigative work begins.
Here's where it gets really interesting because the excavation is no longer just about finding shiny objects or big stones.
No, it shifts entirely.
It is about what is hiding in the dirt itself. And hold on, I have to push back on this, or at least admit my own total confusion.
Okay, lay it on me.
The source mentions that researchers are looking for a 700-year-old plague.
Yes, they are.
I get finding a stone wall. I get finding a silver coin. But how can scientists possibly find a microscopic germ from the 1300s just by scooping up some dirt?
It does sound like magic, doesn't it?
It really does. How does dirt hold on to a bacteria for 7 centuries without it just washing away or breaking down?
It sounds counterintuitive. We think of soil as active, constantly breaking things down.
Right, like composting.
Exactly. But this is where traditional archaeology meets advanced archaeogenetics. The excavation is a 6-week project, and later in May, experts from the University of Southampton are joining the site specifically to conduct advanced soil analysis.
Okay, but physically, how does a bacteria survive in the ground for that long?
It relies on anaerobic environments.
Anaerobic.
Yeah, without oxygen. When a medieval population lives in a concentrated area, their biological material, waste, discarded organic matter, and even human remains becomes integrated into the soil matrix.
So it just gets packed into the ground over time.
Right. If that material ends up in a deep refuse pit, a latrine, or gets sealed tightly under compacted clay floors, it is cut off from oxygen.
Oh, I see.
Oxygen is the enemy of preservation. Without oxygen, the microorganisms that usually decompose biological matter cannot survive, effectively freezing the microscopic evidence in time.
So they're digging into the medieval latrines and the hard-packed dirt floors looking for ancient DNA. But they aren't looking for a living bacteria, right?
No, the pathogens are long dead.
Okay, good. That would be terrifying.
It would be. But modern molecular sequencing allows scientists to extract these soil samples and look for chemical signatures and degraded fragments of DNA.
It's just like tiny genetic puzzle pieces.
Exactly. They aren't looking for a whole intact bacterium. They are looking for the shattered genetic puzzle pieces of specific pathogens. By piecing those fragments back together in a lab, they can positively identify diseases that plagued the residents.
So they're literally zooming in on the dirt to find the biological ghosts of medieval bacteria.
That's a great way to put it. And this raises an important question. Why are the Southampton experts so laser-focused on finding disease at this specific site?
Yeah, why not just look for dietary habits or like regional plant life?
The answer lies in the historical timeline. Historical records definitively show that the Black Death, the bubonic plague, reached Melcombe Regis in 1348.
1348, which means this is roughly a century after these specific houses were built and thriving.
Exactly. You have this bustling, stable coastal settlement that spent the 1200s building infrastructure, trading, accumulating wealth.
Boy, that lies.
And then in 1348, the plague arrived on the shores. The historical records indicate that the Black Death wiped out nearly half of the entire town's population in a very short period.
Half the town.
Half.
It's almost impossible to contextualize that kind of localized devastation. Like you walk down your street today and imagine every second house is just suddenly empty.
It was an apocalyptic event for the people living through it, and that is why this microscopic soil analysis matters so profoundly.
Because it makes it real.
Yes. From a historical perspective, we know the plague happened. We have the written records. But from a scientific and biological perspective, finding the specific pathogen, the Yersinia pestis bacteria, in the soil of these domestic homes offers unprecedented insight into the mechanics of the outbreak.
Wait, if they find the plague DNA in the floorboards of the living room instead of in a massive communal grave outside of town, that completely changes the narrative, doesn't it?
Oh, complete.
It means they were living with it, interacting with it daily inside their own homes.
That is the critical distinction. Usually, archaeogeneticists find plague DNA in mass burial sites.
The plague pits.
Right, the plague pits, because that is where the victims were concentrated. But finding it in the domestic environment, embedded in the soil of the very houses where people slept, cooked, and utilized those cold storage pits, it helps us understand the specific vectors of transmission.
It paints a picture of their living conditions.
It tells us about their daily proximity to the vectors. Bubonic plague was primarily transmitted by fleas carried by rodents.
Right, the rats.
If we find the pathogen's DNA concentrated inside the home, it speaks to the sanitary conditions, perhaps the presence of rats nesting in the thatched roofs or the floor rushes.
Just right there in the living space.
Exactly. And it shows how the disease physically moved from house to house within that tightly packed coastal environment.
It bridges the gap between a historical statistic, reading half the town died in a textbook, and the actual terrifying reality of a microscopic killer moving through a community's kitchen.
It really does.
It makes the abstract tragedy incredibly localized and real.
It grounds the history. It proves that these were real people dealing with a very real, measurable biological threat in the spaces where they felt most secure.
So we have this microscopic tragedy buried in the dirt. But the crazy thing is, directly above that dirt are modern people grabbing coffee, going to work, and driving past this old bowling alley every day.
The juxtaposition is wild.
It is.
Yeah.
And the community's reaction to this dig has become a central piece of the story.
The interaction between the modern residents and the archaeological site is a fascinating dynamic.
The source material highlights that on a recent Saturday, the archaeological team actually opened the site up to the public.
Which is pretty rare.
Yeah. They allowed local Weymouth residents to come in and visit the active dig completely for free so people could stand on the edge of the trenches and witness this history being uncovered in real time.
Which is a highly unusual but brilliant initiative. Generally, active construction and excavation sites are heavily fenced off.
Right, with those big wooden boards?
Yeah, they are hidden behind opaque barriers for safety and security until the shiny new infrastructure is completed.
So what does this all mean? Look at the incredible irony of the situation. You have a plot of land that was slated to be a temporary car park, a place to leave your car for an hour while you run errands.
The most ordinary thing in the world.
It is the most transient, forgettable piece of urban planning imaginable. And suddenly, because of this accidental discovery, this transient space is giving the modern town a profound, permanent sense of identity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is fundamentally about the psychology of place. Dorset councillor Richard Biggs spoke about this phenomenon when discussing the public opening.
What did he say?
He noted that this endeavor is far more than just a dry academic data-gathering project.
It is deeply personal for the people who actually live in Weymouth.
Very personal. Biggs pointed out that allowing residents to physically see the dig helps connect the modern community with a forgotten past.
I can see that.
When you can literally look down into the earth and see the foundation stones laid by people who walked the exact same coastline 700 years ago, it radically deepens your understanding of home.
It grounds you.
Exactly. It provides a psychological sense of continuity. You realize that you and your modern town are just the latest chapter in a very long, very complex story of survival and community happening right under your feet.
It completely recontextualizes your daily routine. You aren't just walking to the grocery store, you are walking over the pathways of survivors, of medieval tradesmen, of an ancient local economy. But the 6-week dig window is going to close eventually.
It is.
The bulldozers will come, and the temporary car park will likely be built. So what happens to the physical history? What is the life cycle of these artifacts once they are pulled out of the trenches?
Well, the artifacts embark on a very meticulous journey. They're not simply boxed up and put in a basement somewhere.
Oh, good.
Once the excavation concludes, every recovered item, every coin, pottery fragment, and medieval tile is transported to a laboratory.
And I imagine cleaning them is incredibly delicate work. You can't just hit a 700-year-old pot with a power washer.
Oh, absolutely not. The cleaning process is highly controlled because the dirt itself, as we discussed with the DNA, contains invaluable data.
Right, you don't want to wash away the history.
Exactly. They have to remove centuries of compacted earth without damaging the material or washing away microscopic evidence baked into the clay. After cleaning, the artifacts undergo a complex stabilization process.
Because pulling them out of the ground shocks their system.
Right. Correct. They have been resting in a stable, dark, often damp environment for 7 centuries.
And suddenly they're in a bright lab.
Yes, suddenly exposing them to modern air, light, and fluctuating humidity can cause them to rapidly degrade or crumble. Conservators use chemical treatments to stabilize the materials.
And once they're stabilized and studied by the scientists,
The ultimate goal and the plan for this specific collection is to display them to the public at the Dorset Museum.
that's fantastic.
So this accidental discovery beneath the MFA bowl will transition from the dark earth into a place of public reverence. The artifacts will be curated and displayed to educate and inspire generations of local residents to come, ensuring the 13th century community is not forgotten again.
What an incredible trajectory.
It really is.
Just to summarize the sheer scope of what we've explored today,
Yeah.
we started by looking at an ordinary, slated-for-demolition bowling alley in coastal Weymouth. We dug through the modern concrete to uncover the structured remnants of 13th century homes.
Complete with early thermal root cellars and standardized coinage.
Right, which proved a thriving local economy. We then zoomed all the way in to the microscopic level, exploring how scientists use archaeogenetics to hunt for the fragmented DNA of the Black Death in the anaerobic soil, a plague that eradicated half the town in 1348.
Such a massive loss.
And we ended by looking at the modern community, standing on the edge of those very trenches on a Saturday afternoon, discovering a deep psychological continuity with the ground beneath them.
It is a powerful reminder of how dynamic and alive the earth beneath our modern infrastructure really is.
It truly is. And I want you, listening to this right now, to think about that the next time you are out walking around.
Just look down.
Yeah, think about the literal layers of human history you might be stepping over on your daily commute, or the next time you're just running an errand to pick up milk. What forgotten infrastructure, what ancient daily routines are stacked silently beneath the pavement of your own neighborhood?
It is a deeply humbling perspective, and I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder, building on the incredible contrast of this site.
Okay, what is it?
In 1348, a thriving, economically stable coastal town was struck by a devastating biological event that killed nearly half of its population. Today, 700 years later, we are carefully digging up the ruins of their homes just to build a temporary place to park our cars.
Wow.
If you fast forward another 700 years, if future archaeologists dig through the ruins of our temporary car parks, our entertainment venues, and our modern homes, what microscopic traces of our current global challenges will they find preserved in the soil? And what will those invisible fragments say about how we lived our everyday lives?
Okay, one question for you. Why are experts calling the discoveries beneath the old bowling alley in Weymouth significant? And what do the medieval walls, pottery, and cold storage structures reveal about 13th century life? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.